When starting to rig a low poly 3D model for a character, you should first check that your hierarchy or your pivot point is set to the base of the character. Now, if you need to change this, go into the hierarchy settings, pivot only, and center it to the object, and then just move it down in the Z-axis so that it is at the bottom of the feet. Now, with that, we also need to make sure that we have the legs spread apart and the arms in a T-pose. If you don't have that, it may be an idea to, before you start to rig, is to rotate the legs and enable yourselves to have a gap between the 2 feet. This seriously helps when we get to the skinning process, in which we're going to do later on, where we will weight the bone's influence to the actual model of the character. So in this video we're going to be looking at making a custom cat rig. Now each of our characters are going to be slightly different from each other, so we're going to start off by going to the create panel. We're going to move over to helpers, and in the drop down menu we're going to go to cat objects. We're going to go to cat parent and we're going to select none. Now with this none, we're going to go into the top view and we're going to drag and create our base of our character, and we're also going to change the units ratio. Now this will actually affect the size of the rig if you use one of the pre-existing ones, and as soon as you've done that, what we want to do is create a pelvis. Now as you can see, the pelvis is extremely low at the moment, and it affects based on the cat units ratio. So I'm just going to place it directly at the pelvis point and try and get it into place as best as possible. So with that, we're going to start to need to create our own rig. Now what's really important for us is to be able to see into the character. So what we're going to do is we're going to press Alt X on our keyboards, and we're going to turn it into the X-ray mode or the see-through mode. And with that, we're going to also freeze our model so that we can not select the object. What you want to do is go to Object Properties, make sure it says Not Show Frozen in grey, and freeze the object. So now we shouldn't be able to select on the character. Now what's quite beneficial before we get going is that your character has a slight bend at the knee point. This is going to be helpful for us a little bit later on when it comes to the animation and making sure that the legs move in the way in which we want them to. So to start us off with, what we're going to do is edit the size of the pelvis. We're going to rotate it into position as well, based on what we have as a visual of our character. So mine's slightly sort of rotated, and we're going to change the height and we're going to change the width as well, just to make sure that our overall object fills as much of the model as possible. This is really helpful later on when it comes to the skinning process, as mentioned a little bit earlier. Now we're going to start off with the leg, so we're going to add a leg, and as it's a human we only need to make sure that the leg has 2 bones for it. If we have anything like a quadruped or a werewolf or anything along those lines, usually the hind legs will have 3 bones, so please bear that into consideration when you are creating them. The best place to start is with the actual IK target, so the inverse kinematic target that's already pre-existing in the rigs. We're going to move that into place and slightly below the actual foot, and then we're going to move upwards and get the actual shape of the foot and the rotation as correct as possible. So we're going to try and rotate them and move. It's easy to go into the left view and see what's going on with those as well. Rotate them into position so that you can get a suitable appearance for the rig. Now I say suitable appearance, what I mean by that is to make sure that the actual model is suitably in position. So I've got slightly rotated outwards feet here, so I'm just going to do that with the majority of the leg, and we're going to do that all the way up as well, just so that we can allow ourselves to have the right amount of bones. Now I'm just going to add another bone to the actual foot, so we're going to put a 1 digit inside of this, so that then we are able to create the ball of the foot. Now currently if we select that, it has 2 bones. We want to make sure that it just has the 1 because we don't want any more than that. We're going to change the size of this, and we're also going to change its width as well. So we should be able to get a nice sort of shape of the foot to go with it. If it's not the right size, you can also use the scale functions to make them larger, so that they fill up as much of the overall shape as possible. Now you can actually edit the shape of these as well, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment, so it edits it to the size that's more bespoke to your own characters. Now you may see something like this happen with the actual the leg. We want to make sure that the actual knee bends the same direction as the actual knee would. So this within animation would actually bend in the opposite direction. So it's good to actually sort of rotate it to make sure it comes forward with the rest of the rig, and we want to sort of make sure that everything rotated in position as it would be on the actual humanoid. So we get them into position as well as possible. Now if we want to edit them further in terms of the position, what we can actually do is to apply an edit poly modifier to them so that we can edit them as much as we like. Now with this, it does come with its sort of scruples, and you have to be kind of careful with it. You have to select the bone that you want, go to edit poly modifier, and within there you can actually edit the shape. Now do not change the hierarchy or the position when in a sub-object mode. If that happens, then the actual way in which the bone acts may change. So try and keep the bones in the same position and only edit the vertices and the geometry in the sub-object mode. Once you're happy with it, what you're going to do is right click, collapse all, and say yes, and it will revert back to being a bone object. So we're going to do that with some of the following bones as well, so that it tries to take up as much of the space of the mesh as possible. And I'm just going to speed up this process. Now a point that I need to make is with the knee is to make sure that it's actually the joint is lining up with the actual front of the knee. Now if we don't do that, what we may have happen is some really sort of weird deformation when we come around to modelling. Now when we get to this point and we're happy with the leg as it is at the moment, what we can do is select onto the pelvis, one of the centralised hubs. There's 2 centralised hubs in a custom rig. You'll have another one at the rib cage as well. And what we need to do is to press add leg, and it will make a copy of the exact same one as what we've just created for the opposite side as well. Now when it comes to this part, we're going to add a spine. Now the spine actually adjusts and rescales the object based on your movement and placement of it. So we're going to continue with the top. I'm going to make sure that in the front view it's in the right position, and I want to make sure that this, pretty much the center of it, rests at the sternum, so that we have the right amount of links going all the way through. And with that, what I'm going to do with all the spine links is to make sure that they fill the space again of our mesh so that we get the best results possible. Once again, if we want to edit the shape of it to make it a little bit better, we can go into the edit poly modifier, and we can add that to it as well. So I'm just going to do it with 1 or 2 parts of the mesh. Then when we're happy with that, what we're going to do next is we're going to add an arm. As you can see here, we need to move it around a little bit so that we can get some nice change in movement. This arm is going to need to be positioned where the shoulder would be, so we're going to start by moving that there. We're going to grab the hand and move that into position as well. So it's probably easier to do this in the top view so that you can see where it lines up with the rest of the mesh. If you struggle with the rotation, turn on an angle snap and it makes it relatively easier as well. I want to make sure that comes to the part where the wrist hits the palm. And we need to make sure that this joint here comes to the elbow. So we're going to move that upwards into position. Okay, now if you wish to rig the hands, that's going to be a little bit different, so we need to scale these as well. And we need to add some bones to them. So move that to the end of the hand, slightly rotate it, turn off the snap. Now we're going to need 5 digits and 3 bones on each of them. So we should have that. Now it takes a little bit of time to set this up, so I'm going to speed up the video. It's a simple process, same way as what we've been doing with the rest of it, but we need to make sure that it's done if we want movement in the fingers. Okay, so when the hand is done, what we were able to do is to duplicate it. Now, if you select all 3 of one of these, they actually all rotate together, so it makes it a little bit easier as well. But we're going to need to select the top, which is the rib cage, which is known as Pelvis 2, which is not really what we want to make sure that things are called sort of the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename this the rib cage. So hopefully we've got cat rig left arm 1. Yeah. Left palm. We're going to do this, change that to thumb 01. This one to thumb 02. And so on. And go through your model to make sure you know exactly what the naming conventions of each of the different digits are before you copy over to the opposite side. Else you'll have to do 2. So with this one, index 01 and so on. I'm going to speed this process up. Okay, so now that I'm happy with the overall shape of the arm and the fingers, I'm going to click on the rib cage and I'm going to add the other arm. Now with that, makes the other one exactly the same, which is great. And the majority of our rib cage is looking decent, and our rig is looking good at the bottom as well. Now we just need to add the head. So we're going to continue from here. Now if we add a spine, what that does then is it allows us to move the neck simultaneously and rotationally, a lot like the rest of the spine. So we're going to do that with that part, and I'm going to give this only 2 bones as a part of the neck, because we don't want too many of them, else there's going to be a lot to worry about. So I'm going to move those into position. Might even be more advantageous to do just the 1 bone for the neck. Yeah, let's go with that. We're going to edit the shape of the head using the Edit Poly modifier. Just going to speed this process up again. Add some geometry to it this time. Doesn't matter what you really do to it in terms of the model, so don't worry about topology. It's just so that we can try and fill as much of the model as we can. Now you could do the ponytail as extra if you wanted to. I'm just going to do a simple extrude just so that it makes sure that everything is taken care of. Come into this view and move that in. Doesn't have to be perfect as long as it is suitably helping you to rig. Now with this, we need to continue the same naming convention as what we've been doing beforehand. So this one is known as a rib cage. We don't want that. We want to make sure that this one is known as the character head, so that we have all of them correctly named. Okay, perfect. So when we're happy with the rig, is we want to make sure that we save. So I'm going to save as, and this one is not ready for rig anymore. It's got custom rig. So I'm going to save that. And also, what I can do is if I select the base of the character, what I can do is actually save the rig now as a preset, so that I can come back to it if I lose it. So if you ever lose the file or it corrupts, then you can make sure that it goes back to the same place in which you were before, without losing too much. So press save, and there we have it. We have our custom rig set up for our character. Okay, now that the rig has been complete, what we need to do is test it and add a skin modifier to the actual model. So from the character model, we're going to go and apply the skin modifier. With that, we're going to add the bones, so we need to press add. Use the drop down menu, press Control and C and select, and it will select all of the child bones as part of it. Now what we'll have now is the rig controlling parts of the mesh, so we need to see how in which it controls that. So we're just going to test a few little things. So what I'm going to do is click on the pelvis of the rig. We're going to go to the motion panel, and now I'm going to introduce you to the motion layers. So the animation of the cat rig happens within here. So at the minute we're in the off or setup mode, and what we're going to do is we're going to click and hold and drag a new absolute layer on, turn on the animation mode, and we're going to grab the little IK target that's part of the foot, and I'm going to lift it up, see how in which the mesh works. I'm going to do that on the opposite side as well, and we're going to see how in which the leg then moves. So what I'm going to do from here is see how the mesh acts to certain little parts of the movement. So I'm going to, just for a little while, I'm going to hide some of the bones. So I'm going to select the character model, press Ctrl and I to invert my selection. I'm going to right click and I'm going to hide selection. So what we can see is that after doing the movement, the model has been affected by the leg movement. So we're going to need to edit the envelopes in order to get this to work as well as possible. So I'm going to go into the skin, I'm going to edit envelopes, turn on vertices, and I'm going to scroll down until I get to the point where it says display and color all weights. So with that as well, we're going to scroll and select the weight tool. So we have this on our screen, and this allows us to edit how the weights are allocated to certain parts or certain vertices. So I'm going to click 2, press loop, and it will loop the whole lot. Now at the minute we can see that this is part of leg 1 and leg 2. Now if you've successfully named this rig, you should have be able to tell the difference. Leg 1, as you can see with the envelope, is the thigh, and leg 2 is the lower leg. So we're just going to move over to the right leg. So right leg 1. And with this we can see that they are 29% to the thigh and 71% to the leg. So what we want to do is to try and plus those a little bit further so that they're more a part of the lower leg than what they are the upper leg. We're going to do this on the next part. We're going to loop that as well, and we'll slowly press the plus sign until it goes into a position that we're happy with. So we're slowly making alterations to the mesh in order to see how and which they work. May want to do more on the top than what we do on the bottom, and maybe slightly adjust the ones that are directly underneath, like so, and taking your time to get as good of a visual as possible of a leg bending. Okay, that's not too bad. Now if we select up the top here, it's not too much of a bad movement around the hips, but there's probably some additional extras you want to do to it. So it's all about sort of going round on each part of the mesh and allocating the weight to each of them. So as you can see, certain parts require a little more intricacy. Now this is the process in which you will have to do for the whole of the body. Now once you're happy with it, you can turn off edit envelopes, and to return the character back where it was, what you want to do is go back to the motion panel with everything unhidden, select the pelvis, delete the layer of the motion, and it will take it straight back to where it was, so that if we put another layer onto it, we should then be able to see the alteration taking place in that aspect of it. What's good to do in terms of a range of motion is to move each leg upwards, to move it backwards as well. Each of those legs, rotate the pelvis and bring it down as well, so you can move the pelvis down, put it into a squat position and rotate it to see how much it's affecting each side once it is in the squat position. Rotate the top of the spine at the rib cage to see how the back is working each way. Same with the head. As we can see, it's slightly pulling on the chest, so we would have to alter that as well. And slightly on the shoulders. We can see on the hands, if we rotate the hands, some nice work going there because of the good setup that we had. Have a look on the upper arm, same again. Probably be a few little things we have to change, but overall a nicely deforming, skinned, custom rigged character. Hopefully that was helpful. Continue watching the next video to see how to animate the character using the saving poses.